Ahead tonight on Soul of the South News, President Obama joins dozens of world leaders in denouncing the continuing violence in Egypt.
The United States strongly condemns the steps that have been taken by Egypt's interim government and security forces. We deplore violence against civilians. We support universal rights essential to human dignity, including the right to peaceful protest.
Have conditions improved for South African miners 1 year after the Maracana massacre? In tonight's cover story, Myrlie Evers in a rarely seen interview 7 years after the murder of her husband Medgar.
I spoke at a mass meeting pleading that the people in Jackson and in Mississippi carry on the fight.
And in our Spotlight report, Soul of the South News looks at the once promising political career of former Illinois Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr.
This is Soul of the South News.
And to the Egyptian people, let me say, the cycle of violence and escalation needs to stop.
President Obama interrupts his family vacation on Martha's Vineyard today to address the ongoing unrest in Egypt. Good evening and welcome to Soul of the South News. I'm Roy Hobbs. President Obama says he's canceling military exercises with Egypt in light of violent turmoil. At least 525 people died Wednesday in clashes between security forces and supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi. 43 of them were police officers. Mr. Obama says the U.S. will not take sides with any particular party or political figure.
I know it's tempting inside of Egypt to blame the United States or the West or some other outside actor for what's gone wrong. We've been blamed by supporters of Morsi. We've been blamed by the other side as if we are supporters of Morsi. That kind of approach will do nothing to help Egyptians achieve the future that they deserve. We want Egypt to succeed. We want a peaceful, democratic, prosperous Egypt.
The joint military exercises would have involved thousands of American air and ground forces. And Pope Francis asked crowds at a public mass to join him in praying for peace in Egypt. The pontiff asked the faithful to pray for peace, dialogue, and reconciliation in that beloved land and in the whole world. Francis issued the prayer before celebrating the Assumption of Virgin Mary. An associate professor of history at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock says the unrest is a result of a basic lack of trust among people. Claire Hupp says we have to keep in mind that the country has no tradition of democracy.
Egypt has a long history of dictatorships, it doesn't have a tradition of democracy. And most of the people in the country are very fearful about the future, about their position in society. We hope it doesn't escalate to the next level, to wide-scale civil war, because that obviously would be something that's happened in Syria. We don't want to see that happen in Egypt.
She says our federal government can only do so much, but that peace talks and mediation are a few options. Myrlie Evers was a pillar of strength for her family and the nation after her husband Medgar was shot and killed in June 1963.
In rarely seen footage from a 1970 Ladies of the Press interview,
we learn more about Mrs. Evers and her foresight about securing freedom and equality for everyone living in Mississippi. That's tonight's cover story.
We call our program Ladies of the Press. As always, an actual press conference, completely ad-lib, completely unrehearsed. My name, Clifford Evans. In the continuing struggle for equal civil rights for all Americans, there is one name which recurs again and again, the name Medgar Evers, Field Director for the state of Mississippi for the NAACP. It was at midnight on June the 12th, 1963, when Medgar Evers returned home from a civil rights meeting. He stepped out of his car, was about to enter his home in Jackson, Mississippi. There was a shot and Medgar Evers was dead. The man accused of his murder stood trial twice, and both times the jury could not agree on a verdict. Our guest is Mrs. Medgar Evers. Mrs. Evers, welcome to Ladies of the Press. We'll have the first question now from Joyce Egginton.
How do people like yourself feel about this, though? Surely there's a tremendous struggle within you when your husband is daily facing danger and you have a family of your own to bring up.
Do wives like yourself try to dissuade their husbands?
Well, I can only speak for myself. There was a time when I tried to encourage my husband to seek other employment that I thought perhaps would be safer. I was interested in his well-being, interested in my children having a father as they grew up, and also interested in having my husband for as long a period of time as possible. But when you have a husband who is as dedicated as mine was, you simply know that you must go along with him, you must back him, and in time you find yourself just as involved as he is in the struggle.
There were times when I was challenged in being his mate through all of the things that we went through. There were times that I wished to throw up my hands and say, enough. And he always replied to me, it's never enough until the job is done, and we still have so much more to do.
Do you think that equality for the Negro ever will come to Mississippi, Mrs. Evers?
Oh, I most certainly do.
How soon, and by what means?
Well, I can't say just how soon, but I do feel strongly that it will come in time.
In our city, in our state, we have in Mississippi more elected officials, black elected officials, than any state in the nation.
Do you ever have an awful feeling that your husband died in vain in the cause of civil rights, Mrs. Evers?
Well, now, that was my main concern after his death. That night that he was killed, I spoke at a mass meeting pleading that the people in Jackson and in Mississippi carry on the fight, that he would not die in vain. And I do believe that I can truly say now that he has not.
His fight for freedom and justice that he participated in, that he died for, inspired a lot of us to go into public service, but also inspired just common people to go out to vote, to get registered to vote, perhaps even inspired Congress, who passed the Civil Rights Act the next year.
Mrs. Evers, the white man who was accused of your husband's murder, Byron de la Beckwith, who was an avowed segregationist, was, as mentioned in the introduction, twice an all-white jury in Mississippi failed to find a case against him. Now, this has been the pattern of Mississippi jurors in the trial of where the lives of Negroes are considered for years. I think we may be seeing it again in the case of the 3 civil rights workers who were murdered in Philadelphia, Mississippi. This despite the progress that there's been with the Civil Rights Bill. Do you see any hope in Mississippi and in any of the deep southern states for real justice in the courts for the Negro?
Well, I feel that that too will come in time, but I am more or less inclined to think that perhaps it will take a much longer period of time.
What does a Negro mother in Mississippi, what does she say to a child when the child asks her, why violence, why discrimination, why are we different? What does a Negro mother say to a child?
That's a very difficult question to answer from you, and especially from your children. You try to take them aside with love, kindness, and understanding and explain to them that they are not different, that there are people who have certain prejudices, and as a result of people having those prejudices, you find that you are not considered an equal, but you also try to tell your children and to encourage them that when they come of age, that they are to do what they possibly can to help right these wrongs.
Mrs. Evers, another personal memory of the Mississippi story I'd like to ask you about. At the time when James Meredith was enrolling for the University of Mississippi, I remember Martin Luther King was in New York, and I was covering some meetings that he was holding in Brooklyn to raise money for his Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And we were in a taxi together when the news came on the taxi radio that there had been a report that Meredith might not enroll after all. And I remember that Martin Luther King got very excited about this. And he said, that boy must go to the university even if he has to die. Now, do you feel that this is the only approach, that Negroes must still be ready to die for the cause?
I do feel that in order for the cause to be won, that there must be enough Negroes and whites also that are willing to give their lives. This is a struggle in America, not only for Negroes but also for whites. It's America's struggle.
I had to ask myself, Merle, do you hang up the banner tomorrow? It's tempting because it's a lot of hard work in all of this. And it's a lot of hard work for all of those who worked aside him, but they gave until they had nothing else to give.
And when Soul of the South News continues.
The fall from grace for a once political rising star, Jesse Jackson Jr.
This has been an extraordinarily difficult time for our family.
Explosions rock Beirut, sending hundreds into the streets in protest. And a rodeo clown, banned for performing at the Missouri State Fair, has a welcome mat rolled out for him in another southern state.
You are watching Soul of the South News.
It's been a hard fall from grace for former Illinois Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. In our spotlight story, the once rising political star is on his way to prison after pleading guilty to improperly using campaign funds.
Jesse Jackson Jr. had a promising political career, the eldest son of civil rights legend Jesse Jackson. He was elected to Congress in 1995, even asked to speak at the Democratic National Convention in 2008.
I grew up with the lessons of another generation, the Selma generation, my father's generation.
Jackson is preparing to spend 30 months in federal prison. An emotional day in court yesterday for his family, capping a spectacular political downfall. Now he's asking for redemption.
I still believe in the power of forgiveness. I believe in the power of redemption.
Jackson's father spoke after the sentencing.
This has been an extraordinarily difficult time for our family. I speak really today as a father.
The charge against Jesse Jackson Jr.? Misusing $750,000 in campaign funds as his personal treasure chest, spending the money on lavish dinners, nightclubs, lounges, a $43,000 Rolex watch, even Michael Jackson memorabilia. Before being sentenced yesterday, Jackson wept as he addressed the court, saying, "I was wrong. I know I have let a lot of people down." Now the question, can he ever regain his political promise?
It's been a family that we have watched, just like the Kennedys, you know, through ups and downs. And so there's this continuing soap opera that I don't think is over yet.
Now, after Jackson Jr. serves his time, his wife Sandra will spend 12 months in prison for filing false tax returns. And up next here on Soul of the South News.
A new television ad reignites the debate over health care in America, a debate that could impact how and when Obamacare will be implemented. And the Smithsonian Museum introduces a new mammal species.
Soul of the South News. This is home.
This is Google animation of what it's believed that yesterday's crash of the UPS cargo plane looked like. Both pilots were killed in the pre-dawn fiery crash just outside the Birmingham, Alabama airport. The NTSB was finally able to recover the cockpit voice and flight data recorders this afternoon. Flames in the plane's tail section kept them from getting to it until now. The black boxes should help investigators determine why there was no distress call before the crash. A friend of both pilots says this is tough on their families.
Wonderful family, his mother and father, just wonderful people, and they're going through a really bad time right now.
The black boxes are being sent to Washington to be examined. Now, these are the first images of an explosion in Beirut, Lebanon's southern suburbs, a stronghold for Hezbollah. Video from the country's national news agency shows ambulances rushing to the scene. You can see dark smoke rising from a burning building as crowds in and around the area stand by. It's unclear if there are any casualties because of that blast. A painful anniversary in South Africa today. Today marks 1 year since the deadly Marikana massacre, where 34 striking platinum mine workers were shot to death by police. It was the bloodiest post-apartheid incident in the country. The workers were striking over pay issues, saying they needed to be paid a living wage. According to a worker still at the mine, that issue still exists today. A memorial at the site of the killings is slated for tomorrow. A new pro-Obamacare commercial hit the airwaves today.
It's nice to see somebody's looking out for the little guy.
The law works.
In the ad, a North Carolina couple says the passage of the Affordable Care Act got them a $350 insurance rebate and a $50 premium reduction. This is the third ad supporting the plan from the independent political group Organizing for Action. It's estimated that 7 million Americans will buy insurance from state exchanges. Open enrollment begins in October. Senator Jim DeMint, the president of the Heritage Foundation, is asking politicians opposed to the health law to defund it. Emotional testimony in the Michael Jackson wrongful death suit against concert promoter AEG Live. Jackson's ex-wife, Debbie Rowe, fought back tears as she testified about Jackson's fear of pain and his reliance on doctors. She said doctors competed to treat him for pain after his hair caught fire in the 1984 Pepsi commercial. Criminal defense attorney Tom Mesereau says that's what's at stake in this case.
The defense is claiming that he was addicted to prescription medications because they want to show two things. They want to say he was responsible for his own demise, and number two, if they're held liable, they want to keep the damages low.
Jackson's children and his mother, Catherine, are suing AEG Live for more than $1 billion. They say the concert promoters contributed to Michael Jackson's death. The rodeo clown who mocked President Obama and was banned from ever performing at state fairs in Missouri has been invited to Texas. Texas Republican Congressman Steve Stockman says the unnamed clown is welcome to perform in his state. While politicians from both sides of the aisle have condemned the stunt as disrespectful to the president, Stockman says it was just a harmless gag. The famous Marching 100 is back. Florida A&M Marching Band will be playing at the school's first football game this year, 2 years after it was suspended from performances. The suspension came after a band member died in a hazing incident. There are some changes, though. Membership has dropped from more than 400 to 126. And finally, take a look at the newest species of mammal. Scientists at the Smithsonian in Washington say it's called an olingito. It's considered a small member of the raccoon family and lives in the treetops of the Andes Mountains. It features big eyes, red-orange fur, weighs about 2 pounds, and is a little smaller than a house cat. It's the first mammalian carnivore species to be newly identified in the Americas in 35 years. And still ahead here on Soul of the South News.
Some simple suggestions to keep college students from packing on the pounds.
Topping your health news tonight, how to avoid gaining that so-called freshman 15. You know, heading off to college for the first time means new friends, new environment, and a new way of life, which includes eating. A new study found that freshmen on average gain between 2 and 4 pounds in their first year. Now, research shows that that's usually the start of a progressive weight gain. but you can keep it at bay by keeping your fridge stocked with healthy snacks. Substitute chips and cookies with apples, carrots, and peanuts. Eat a good breakfast. It'll keep your energy up and your metabolism active all day. Don't drink your calories. Drinking alcohol can pack on the pounds pretty quickly. And finally, keep moving. Staying active is the best way to stay fit. If you became a new parent in 2012, there's research from the USDA that says it'll cost you $241,000 over 17 years to raise your child. That's an increase of $6,000 from the year before. Experts say child care, health care, and clothing expenses have shot up the most, causing that increase. When you break the numbers down, though, most of the money, 30%, goes to housing, and that's followed by child care, education, and food costs. People who have more sex are more likely to earn higher wages. That's according to new research from the Institute for the Study of Labor. It found that people who had sex more than 4 times a week earned significantly higher wages. The study suggests that it could be because people who have frequent sex tend to be happier, have higher self-esteem, and may even have better reasoning ability.
Tomorrow on Soul of the South News, it's a small place with a big name on the edge of the New Orleans French Quarter, and it's a place where almost everyone coming to town wants to eat.
I've already had to buy the chicken. It's really good.
Sample the flavor and fare at Willie Mae's Scotch House tomorrow. That does it for the Soul of the South News tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow night. Till then, I'm Roy Hobbs. Good night.